Hey, 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 what is going on? IK Familia, it is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and we are back again today for another IK, or I should say Infinity Kingdom video. Today, I'm pretty excited because one of the things that I really want to talk about, something I have been looking forward to actually talk about for a while now, is player drop-off, and how every single server from day one is doomed to essentially die. And I'm going to really break down and explain why this is from a fundamental level, because part of it has to do with player psychology, other parts have to do with in-game system mechanics and the way that they're just defaultly built in these kingdom builders. And then we're also going to explain how just kind of the power dynamic factors into this, and probably some other miscellaneous points as well. Before we get started, though, as always, make sure you guys sub, like, ring that notification bell, and of course, if you want to be a part of our conversation, you can join our Discord, which you can find in the pinned comment or description down below. So let me start off with, right, why is it that player drop-off occurs, and specifically, what do we mean by player drop-off? So player drop-off is really defined into a few different areas. Usually the biggest one is that players just stop playing, right? For whatever reason it may be, they get tired of the game, they try it out, they stop, they're playing it for a short period of time, and then they stop, right? And stopping can essentially be them stopping the game or leaving your server and re-rolling on a new server, right? That's kind of what I would really break down the whole stopping, because you're essentially losing the activity there from one of two ways in this one example. Another example is that you can have players that can play in your server for a while, but then for whatever reason, they will just slowly stop playing. And that can actually come from a few other different ways, but typically happens later on in a server's life, not usually within the first week or two. Now, some of those other areas can be, poor leadership from alliances, poor management from alliances. That includes the R5s and R6s. It could be poor management in the ways of maybe you don't cap any cities, right? Some players feel that capping cities is important. Maybe you're not sending educational mails out to your players. Maybe you're not socially engaging with them, right? Maybe you're not putting up markers in a timely manner. Maybe you're missing out on engaging and participating in events. All of those things can factor into whether or not players may consider either A, leaving your alliance, or B, just flat out leaving the server, because they may think that the precedent that you and or your management team have set is that of the standard of the server, right? Even though, again, if we logically think about it, that does not necessarily mean that, but some players will assume that. Right, so that's kind of big point number two. Number three would be that when players are looking at the leaderboards, you will always have a group of players that just wants to keep applying and trying to get into a higher ranked alliance. This is probably, I would argue, the next biggest factor, because there are usually a good amount of players, more than a few, that will do this. Especially, and even more so, if there is no structure established early in the server. And usually this happens because there is not a large embodied group that comes in, right? If you're usually kind of falling into this 99%, God, I'm using usually a lot today. If you fall into this 99% of how servers start, right, where it's individual alliances and no one comes in with a group of two or more alliances, then you're more subjective to this happening. And that's because the alliances themselves are all on their own page, right? No one's communicated yet, especially when the server starts, and everyone has their own idea, if they even do, on how they want their alliance to be involved in the server, or maybe what they see as server goals. The underlying point here is that because of this, it creates a vacuum of sorts, a funneling system of sorts, where, or even a ladder climbing system of sorts, probably better yet, where some players will want to keep grinding their way to the top. And I'm sure for some of you that have watched my content on somewhat of a consistent basis or semi, you have heard me talk about this before, where all servers are pretty much destined to die, and on top of that, more so, they're also destined to become mega alliance structured by default. And that is because of the funneling passiveness that happens in servers just by default. And then, in addition to that, the fact that players, themselves, right, or the fact that there's just no structure, right? So there's no structure. Alliances are kind of doing their own thing, and because they're doing their own thing, every alliance wants to power up, every alliance wants to get stronger, every alliance wants to climb the leaderboards, right? So you're kind of, almost internally competing in a unorganized way versus each other, right? Where it's like your server is really a free-for-all, and you're just hoping that an explosion doesn't happen, right? Or something that sparks war on a smaller, big scale. And so those are probably the two biggest things, right, that kind of goes into point 3 and point 4 on why you're always going to see player drop off, and how that factors in a few of those areas. Then some of, I would say, like the miscellaneous things that can cause this could be poor mismanagement, right, on a server level. Like, let's say you're not sending out good server mails, right? Maybe they're not educational, they're not informative, right? I've seen some unfortunate server mails. For those of you that have watched my server coverage or server analysis videos, right, where we kind of do 6 to 8 servers at a time, you've seen some of the server mails that some kingdoms will send out. And you look at these and you're just like, what? Is this... Am I joining this server to get a date? Am I... man, these guys are like pretty petty. What's up with these like one-word insults that are coming out? And you get some of those. And don't get me wrong, that's going to be applied to any kingdom builder, right? Again, also because the people that are going to be king or queen have different ages, varied level of experience and knowledge, right? Not everyone is expected to be, the creme de la creme of server logistics, right, and professionalism and etiquette. So the big thing I like to point out in these points that I've listed is that, gosh, no pun intended, is that it is just important to have realistic expectations when you are going in to servers, so you know why player drop-off can occur, so you know why every server is essentially destined to become a mega alliance structured server by default, right? Unless you kind of take charge in certain areas because of these things that happen. And they all factor in to player drop-off, right? You can have a server that's a mega alliance server where, and what I mean by that, right, for those that may not be familiar with that term, essentially what it means is that you have an alliance or two alliances that are just so much stronger than everyone else. And it creates this kind of funneling effect where you kind of get into like, here's the 1%, here's the 99%. And that in and of itself, right, I've seen this system ran in other servers or other kingdoms and other kingdom builders. And, sometimes the citing that the alliance will say is that, oh, well, we're just building for IB, right? We're building for whatever the AVA event is going to be. And, that's great and all, right? And I think for servers that are going to build that way, as long as you're upfront about that with people, right, I think that's okay. You just have to recognize the kind of pros and cons that are going to come with that. I myself would never do that because I've just seen where that ends more consistently than not. And usually where it ends, or I should say where it has the highest percentage chance of ending, is that usually if you are the biggest alliance by far, and that's whether it's one or two, sometimes these alliances, or players from these alliances, can feel entitled. They can feel entitled to more capitals, more cities, higher placings in reward events, right? Whether that's King of the Hill, if it's COR winning all the time, right? So where other factions or other color factions don't have an opportunity to win. It can also create this indirect effect where, because you're funneling players to the top alliances, let's say, as an example, let's say you funnel players into 2 colors, right? But the third color doesn't have any players that are strong enough to capture relics and World Heart to win COR, right? Because the players have been funneled into these 2 alliances compared to maybe spreading it out. That can cause a long-term issue where players or even a full alliance may leave, right? Why would an alliance stay in a server if they don't have an opportunity to participate and engage in these certain events that really, in my opinion, should be for everyone? And so, again, right, these are just more reasons on why players would consider leaving a server, or even full alliances considering to leave a server, and why you're always... Player drop-off will be something that every server struggles with all the time. Why? Because it's constant. Player drop-off never ends. You are always going to have players that, lose passion, they're just not active anymore, and they just become silent, right? Or they become inactive. And because of that, right, it's one of the reasons why you do things like recruiting for your server. Migration is there, right? It's meant to boost activity, boost morale, boost server health. But figuring out, right, how that special sauce, if you will, on how to increase activity, keep player retention, these are the bread and butter on what players hopefully will eventually see, right, are kind of servers that, more so separate themselves from the rest, because it is really, really important to make sure that, at least, again, in my opinion, that you are, and servers or management groups are doing the best job they can to represent the players that are in their servers. So I think I'm going to round it out there. That's it for me. I, of course, would love to hear what you guys think, right, and girls, of course, because as you know, we're gender neutral. What do you think about player drop-off? Do you see it on a day-to-day basis, a week-to-week basis? Did you notice it the first month, the first few weeks of your server? Or another way of framing the question is, in which ways have you seen player drop-off occur, and why did they happen? I would love to know what you guys have experienced, what you're thinking. Let me know in the comments down below. That is it for me. Until next time, as always, we'll catch y'all later.